Hello, and welcome to the Godless Bitches podcast. Godless Bitches is a podcast of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is dedicated to the separation of church and state and the promotion of positive atheism. I'm your host, Beth Presswood, here today with Jen Peeples.
Hi, everybody.
Lynnea Glasser.
Hello.
And Tracie Harris.
Howdy.
We can be reached at bitches@atheist-community.org. So, how is everyone today?
Good.
Doing well.
Not too bad.
So, since the last podcast, we have decided on our contest winners from our last contest, which was the church sign contest. I sent out the Surly Ramix necklaces on Monday to Matthew, Catherine, Nicole, and oh crap, I forgot the other person's name. I did have permission to say their names, although I didn't have any other identifying information. Jason was the other one. So congratulations to them. We also have a new contest. We have 3 gift bags from imeltwithyou.com of body scrub, body cream, and soap in 3 different scents: Zen, Ginger Lily, and Amber. We can all pass this around and smell this.
They all smell really good. I was enjoying it before the show.
Tropical tuberose is another.
They have like these edible smells. They're one of those like fruity edible smells. Wow.
And coconut lemongrass, my personal favorite. So, the contest is going to be to send in a quote from any of our episodes, and you'll be entered to win one of these 3 lovely gift bags. So, send us the quotes. And, if you have any crap you want to, send us, that's fine too. We just kind of got this.
Thank you.
Not that this is crap.
Oh, true.
Yeah, no, it's really quite
It
nice.
is very nice.
All right, so we also have an announcement. AJ Johnson is going to be on our program on February 1st, so next week. And she'll be telling us a lot about American Atheist. So, we had a good podcast last week. We got a lot of mail and a lot of mail that disagreed with us on some points.
Yeah.
So, Jen, are you a little miffed at some mail we got? Jen?
Well, Jen is Skyping in, so it sounds like maybe she's having a little bit of trouble.
Perhaps.
Yeah, she
I'm
was.
not hearing
she
her.
was on during the sound check.
Oh, the
That's
joys
too
of podcasting.
Well, I'll jump in. I don't know, maybe you can figure out what's going on. Maybe, call her with a telephone or something. Or see if you can get her on Facebook. So last week I talked about, how religion is used to perpetuate abuse. And I talked about different ways, how religion bolsters this idea that men are in control of the family, men can do with women whatever they want, and how it can be used to alienate families and say, this person's not a believer, they're not, they should come back with me so I can get them to be a believer again. And also, there was a third way, which was, can't remember that now. But turns out there's a fourth way, too, that I had no idea, and I had not heard about. But this just happened, so I felt like it was a good kind of addendum to the 3 ways I mentioned last time. And that's to straight up blame the supernatural entity. So in So this is from Kansas City News, KMBC.com, which is their Channel 9 ABC News site. Suspects in police custody can be pretty creative with their alibis, but this one man in Wisconsin went one step further by claiming supernatural shenanigans are to blame for striking his wife. So his wife called the police and told deputies that he was attempting to strangle her twice, then punched her in the face, and so she called 911 for help. According to the publication, when questioned about the alleged incident, West told deputies that a ghost did it. So he straight up said that a ghost did it. And you can only say that if you believe in ghosts. And spectral evidence is not admissible in court. So this is something that could not hold up. But, yeah, this guy tried to get out of and excuse his domestic abuse by relying on supernatural / religious excuses. And that shit does not fly.
I wonder if he really believes it, or if he's maybe setting up for an insanity plea or something.
If he really believes it. Maybe he really believes it's plausible. And maybe he doesn't believe that a ghost did it, but if he claims that a ghost did it, that'll be good enough for the police to say, well, we can't prove that a ghost didn't do it, so I guess we can't convict this guy. I don't know, that's my thinking. Maybe it is setting up for insanity. Maybe
he's just really insane.
Maybe he's really insane. Maybe he's taking some kind of drugs, some kind of alcohol.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think he was just trying to come up with any kind of excuse for how this physical evidence could be explained away and not implicate him. Usually it's something like, she fell, or she was attacking me, so I defended myself by retaliating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's unique.
So that's special.
Yeah, yes.
That's not what I would have ever expected, but yeah, I figured that deserved a little asterisk.
But there's you hear sometimes about people abusing their children with that.
With ghosts, or
yeah, with all kinds of like supernatural, like the kid was possessed, or what I mean.
True. Yeah, we had to perform an exorcism on the kid.
Or they've actually had cases where parents murdered their children because they believed they were possessed or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Maybe he thought he was possessed. Yeah, and then they used to tell kids stories all the time. You better behave or else this supernatural entity will get you. You'll get your thumbs cut off.
Those, I think...
The floating head of death. Have you seen that? Remember the Far Side? Where they keep telling the kids, like, you better get up there and better be asleep, or the floating head of death. And they have, like, a helium balloon that's all decorated, like the floating, and they put it outside the window, like, to frighten the children.
Oh, I haven't seen that. That sounds pretty...
Oh, I've got
awesome.
I've got the complete Far Side. We can look for it.
Oh, cool.
Fictive agents of enculturation, I think, is what those are called. That just popped into my head, I think, from anthropology class. Like the boogeyman will get you if you don't, do this thing that kids are supposed to do in your culture, like, your chores or whatever.
Yeah, there's versions of Santa like that. There's like the evil Santa.
Krampus?
Is that what it is?
I
think so.
Where he actually comes and whips them or something.
Yeah, so women, you better obey your husband or else a ghost will punch you.
That's not funny. It's funny, but it's not funny. I mean,
I know.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
But it's not humorous.
It's so terrible that we have to laugh or we'll cry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it seems like this is getting a lot of publicity, and I don't think this guy's going to get away with it.
Good. All right, so looks like we have Jen back on.
Yes, I don't know what happened. I just dropped off for some reason.
Ghosts.
Yeah, it must have been it. Yeah, so anyway, one of the things I was going to talk about was an email we got this week. Guy wrote in to us after listening to our latest podcast from last week, and in his email he has a bunch of rants, but this is one of them. It said, "You ladies were talking about the problems with magazines for men and how horrible they are in your latest podcast. Why didn't you talk about how Cosmo or its ilk describes men as blabbering fools, controlled more by their dick than anything else? I'm sure if you spent some time on this as well, you would have found something." Well, actually, if you've spent much time reading Cosmo or its ilk, you'll realize that this magazine promotes the kinds of sexual stereotypes or sexist stereotypes that feminists oppose, and certainly those of us on this podcast oppose them. But the other thing, and I think the thing that you seem to have missed, is the fact that we were talking about a paper that was published in a peer-reviewed journal about lads mags and their effect on their readers. And so if you have a peer-reviewed journal article on Cosmo's effects on men or women or anything like that, we will be happy to discuss it on the Godless Bitches. Until then, we're not going to go trolling the aisles of various magazines trying to find something that is offensive to men so we can attack it on here just for balance. Again, we had a peer-reviewed paper, and actually I was sent a link to this peer-reviewed paper by a couple of people, and one of them was a guy. And so obviously it was something that a lot of people were reading, thought it would be interesting to the show, and I think it was. So again, we didn't just randomly go out and try to find something that showed that all of these magazines are horrible. And actually, we didn't say they were horrible. We just kind of talked about what the paper said. So if you thought they were horrible, that was your interpretation. And I wonder if you even read the paper.
Yeah, can I just interject here? This is Tracie. I think I mentioned that if one of those magazines was brought to an ACA happy hour, we'd probably have a good chuckle over it. I didn't say we would all be offended and freaked out by it. I think we'd think it was funny.
Exactly.
And also, I agree with you. It's like, even if somebody finds a paper on Cosmo, it's like, sure, I'm happy to discuss it. Number one, I agree with you. It's as offensive to women as it is to men. And number two, if the thing about this particular paper is it was just published. So this was actually what you would call, quote, news.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter like what your take on it is. It was simply something that came out and we chose to discuss that. And I agree. It wasn't about, and I made the statement point blank that this wasn't about slamming pornography.
Exactly. And I think I made a point of saying that, this paper doesn't say that pornography is harmful to women, and we're not making that claim either. That, the paper had specific conclusions, and it all centered around, descriptions of, attitudes about women that were published in there. But, you could not extend that to make the claim that, pornography is harmful to men or women, from that paper.
Yeah, and I can't think of what could be more offensive than a magazine that's telling women that, well, if you really want to do something or be something, it's all defined by your effect on men, and you need to sexually attract men in order to validate yourself, which is what these, what a Cosmo type mag is promoting.
Well, and in light of that, we talked about how if somebody brought one of these lads mags to an ACA happy hour, we would have a good chuckle. And so in the spirit of that, let me read you some of the articles that you can find in the latest Cosmo, and, we'll see what our reaction is to this, right? Okay. So from the latest Cosmo, there's a section on sex positions. And some of the articles include reverse cowgirl, girl on top, shower sex ideas. Okay. In the makeup and beauty section, we have how to get rid of a hickey.
Hey, that can be useful.
That could be, yeah.
So could
How
the
do you
sex
get rid of
positions.
But does anybody seriously need a book to tell them that the woman can be on top and then the man can be on top and that you can get together in all sorts of different ways, really?
Well,
You can
well,
only
now
cover
they have
so much
they have
material.
sex how-tos in here as well, and included in the sex how-tos are how to give a hand job, how to talk dirty, how to have sex, how to give a blowjob, and how to put on a condom. And I think if you need instruction, those would probably be really good articles to read.
I have never been able to get a condom on.
No, it's actually really...
Even with my 3 centimeters.
I know. I was gonna say what you're 3 centimeters or.
So you need to get a female condom. They go in. That's how. But no, it's important to have how to put on a condom because there are a bunch of steps that people skip over, like checking the expiration date, checking that the package is still intact. that
Make sure
still
there's
enough
that
air
reservoir
bubble.
at the tip.
Make sure there's the reservoir. Make sure that you don't store it in your wallet or in your glove box where it's exposed to a bunch of heat. Make sure you pull out right away. Make sure it fits properly. Not too tight or snug.
And don't use the oil base. The
Oil-based lube.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll tear up your condom like ridiculously fast.
Well, and don't try to save money by reusing condoms.
Wow. Yeah.
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me
they're
you
not
don't do
wash and
that.
wear.
Wow. Yeah, please don't do that.
Okay, so you have gotten your condom education from Godless Bitches here.
Which is a service.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and we giggled about it.
Yeah. And Tracie, I think you should probably just go to Good Vibrations and get yourself a bigger dick if you're having trouble getting the condom on.
I have one.
Oh, there we go. Did you find anything sexist? I mean, I know it's kind of that's a lot of magazine to cover.
I don't think like individually, like an article about sex or a how-to sex thing. I mean, those in themselves are not problematic. It's just that issue after issue after issue is, ladies, here's how you can be desirable to men.
Sure.
And it's just that culture of here's what defines you that is so pervasive that I think is what makes up the problem.
That's true.
I agree. And unfortunately, Cosmopolitan has now extended this to men because they've got a Cosmo for guys now.
Oh.
And it's got some of the same stuff in it. So
I think the Cosmo for guys is really just for the girls to give to their guys.
yeah, I think so. And if you cannot have a conversation about what you want from a partner, then perhaps you're not old enough to be having sex. Just a thought.
That's a good thought.
There are pretty old people who don't have those conversations.
Well, then they're not mature enough.
Yeah, so let's go with mature, because there are some young people who could talk on and on about that. I don't want them to feel left out.
Yeah.
All right. So, Cosmo, sex, whatever.
Was there more to that email, or was that?
Well, there were several other items in that email. And one of them was, let's see.
Because I remember it was rather long.
Yeah. This is the guy that was complaining about.
Oh yeah.
A guy that he spends time with his 7-year-old daughter. He gets up with her on the weekends and plays video games or watches movies with her in her bed while the mother sleeps in, and somebody thought that was awful. And I was sitting here thinking, sounds like a good guy to me.
Yeah, whatever. Weird.
But yeah, this guy, the last thing was, also I wish you would drop the feminism tag and say you're for equality first, simply because feminism is not equally focused on both sexes. It's inherently from the female view, if only in the name. So basically, a lot of the guys out there that object to feminism, I think they have this knee-jerk reaction because it's got femme in the name, and therefore it's got to be female-oriented or something.
You know what? Let me just, in the interest of fairness, I posted this on my Facebook wall, and we were kind of talking about it a little bit. And I had a misconception about feminism. Like, I had that misconception that it was, a women's rights movement. And so I understand, it's got like female kind of integrated into the label. At this point, I'm not suggesting anybody rebrand it, but I think that there might have initially been a little bit of better, I guess, labeling if it was supposed to be integrating everything. But I also understand that when you're talking about gender inequity in the U.S. and years ago, especially because even in my lifetime, things have changed a lot. It was predominantly, aimed against women. So it's not that I don't understand it, and why there would be this a majority focus on the gender that is most heavily disparaged. But I did kind of get what they were saying, and I shared that misconception as well. And that was one of the things I learned being on the podcast was my thoughts about it were incorrect. And I think that it's, so it could be men or women. Anybody could be kind of, I guess, I don't want to say intentionally misled by the name, but somehow it does sort of come across as like a women's rights label.
Yeah, and I think part of that is helped by whether we like it or not, we kind of have this idea in our culture that the male is the default. And, because, we see it in everything like, all men are created equal. And we're like, okay, well, what about us? And then you get that includes women, But if you say all women are created equal, there's not the same understanding that also includes men.
The thing is, that statement didn't include women.
Yeah, exactly. and we had to work really hard to get it to include women. And now it's, when I say men, I mean women too. And you get that a lot in different, contexts. But you rarely get this concept that if I say women, I mean to include
men.
Everybody.
I meant men when I said women. I meant everyone.
Yeah. So I think part of that is just this. People are so primed to assume that men are the default, and so if you see something with femme in it, the perception is that it's women only, and in this case, it's not. And actually, there's a pretty good book called The Mismeasure of Woman that was written by Carol Tavris. And I think Stephen Gould wrote, I think he was the one that wrote The Mismeasure of Man. And Carol Tavris took that and talked about the mismeasure of woman. And she talks a lot in the book about how if we regard men as the default, then what you end up with in terms, as far as women goes, is like this perception that women are defective men.
Yeah, I agree. I see that. I've encountered that. I think part of it is that I find interesting is that you don't normally in the same groups see something similar with regard to, for example, gay. People seem to understand that gay is different, but not worse. But then they'll have some difference between men and women, and it'll be like women are not the same in this regard, and so there's something wrong here with the women, and why are they like this? And so it turns into an examination of what the hell's wrong with these women. And really, it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm a woman, and this is normal for women, and it's different than men, but it's normal for women, so it's normal for me. And if you were to say that about gay, they would get it. Like, you can say, this person is like, this is a guy and he likes guys. And that's because he's gay. And they're just like, oh, okay. They don't say, well, I don't understand, why doesn't he like girls if he's a guy? It's like you don't get that same sort of, why isn't he like me? But when it's men and women, there's this weird thing, which is kind of weird to me because, I mean, even in, you have to talk in general terms. There's generals, and then you get into the fringe, the edges of things where things get more gray. And that's how many things work. But you have these generalities where you can fairly, go down the street and visually pick out men and women. That's not uncommon. Now, that's not to say that every case is going to be cut and dry, but 9 times out of 10, you can look at somebody and say that's a male or that's a female, just by virtue of what they look like, how they're built physically, what are they? And when you see such a stark contrast and then expect the thing to be just like you, it's like, really? But then you'll see like 2 guys. You're looking at them, you can't even tell them apart. One's gay and one is straight. And you think to yourself, why is it that this guy is just like this other guy? But when he says he likes men, nobody questions that in an enlightened community. And they say, well, you know, he's different. He's gay. That's why he likes guys. And it's like, okay, well, I'm a woman. That's why I have a different perspective on like sexuality, for example. I have an entirely different experience with sexuality. I have an entirely, and it's not just socialized. It isn't just a social experience. There's also like an entire million years of evolution behind this. That is, you can see I'm different than you. So why do you expect me to react the same? And when I don't, why do you immediately start looking at, well, how has society messed you up to make you think or feel this way or react this way? It's like, what makes you think that it's like, where's your evidence that it's social and not evolutionary? You know, and it reminds me of one of the studies that I was looking at where they were talking about like first-time sexual encounters, and they had rates of orgasm between men and women in a first-time encounter. And the rates of orgasm for women were much lower, and they were saying this might account for why some women are not as excited about, you know, like cold call sexual encounters as men, because men are more likely to orgasm on a first encounter. It's just a reality. And so when I look at that, it's like, why wouldn't somebody think to themselves, this might be why Tracie's not as up for, like, you know, sex with someone she just met than a male might be? Like, how is that not even a consideration? That it's like there might be a physical reason for it. That if I don't think I'm going to get the kind of pleasure I want from like a one-time thing, it might not be as exciting to me as somebody who thinks, oh, I might get an orgasm out of this. Why is that not reasonable? You know what I'm saying? Why would immediately people say, oh, it's because you're socialized to be like Victorian era, you know, cold.
Yeah. I think the equivalent kind of act would be, imagine you met up with a guy and you pegged him and you got off on it. And then you were like, well, that's it. That's the end of the sexual encounter.
Right.
And he might have orgasmed, maybe not. You know, that's kind of up to him on if he gets off on it. And imagine if that was for you as a guy, if you're a guy, that was the encounter that you were expected to have and enjoy, and not really ask for more or be able to enjoy anything
or
else.
do you expect more? Like, what if that is what if that is what you expected from the encounter? It's like and anyway, the point being, whenever there is this difference, it's like, oh, you know, why are women so sexually uptight? It's like, maybe I'm not uptight. Maybe I just would rather have a higher likelihood of an orgasm, which means a repeated encounter. So a one-time thing might not be the gamble, the payoff that you can expect out of it as a guy, just because you are more likely to orgasm in that scenario than I am most of the time.
Well, and you know, Dan Savage actually had a call that related to this on his podcast, and I think it was a guy who was calling about I guess why his girlfriend didn't say yes more often. And Dan was asking him, well, you know, when you ask her for sex, what are you asking for? And basically it was intercourse. And Dan's comment was, well, you know, maybe you ought to vary what you do a little bit, because he said, you know, his comment was, if I knew I was getting fucked every time, I'd say yes a lot less often. So
yeah, I actually had a friend of mine was a gay male, and we were talking about, you know, just sex in general, oral sex, and different concepts of sex. And I remember one statement he had made was something about oral sex, and he was just like, and if you get, you know, oral sex, then you have an orgasm, and that's pretty much what you're going for. That's like it. That's sex. That's the orgasm. That's what you want. That's what you're going to get. And I thought I was like, wow, how really male that perspective is, because that's not, if the female looked at it that way, you know, there'd be a lot of times she didn't have sex. because you're not orgasming as much or as easily. And I mean, yeah, it's don't get me wrong, it's really good when you have a partner that's concerned with that, and both of you are concerned with that, and you are focused on that. But I, like Lynnea was saying, I just can't imagine most guys having the number of encounters that women are expected to endure that do not result in an orgasm that is supposed to be fulfilling. And so, but for me, when I think in terms of like sex, I would feel like it wasn't a complete encounter if all I got was the orgasm. Like if I had oral sex and I just got the orgasm, I would think, well, there's something missing there. There's another part to this that didn't happen. So it's weird because it was kind of a strange male thing, I thought, to hear somebody saying like, you know, oral sex is fine with me because I get the orgasm and that's what it's all about. And I was like, wow, that's very male.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, important to be concerned that both parties are getting their enjoyment, their orgasm. And I feel like that is a little bit a socialization thing, that the women kind of have this more egalitarian desire, and the men kind of are a little more self-focused. I'm not saying that for everyone. I'm just saying that's kind of an overall statistical thing, and that's, I don't know, it's not fair, and that's
but I can say that even when I've been with people who were very, I would say, you know, very good about thinking of other people, you know what I mean? Very into like the entire experience and thinking about the other person, that there are still those initial encounters were not the best. I almost in my mind would think to myself, the first encounter with a guy is almost like a write-off. That's how I would look at it. And, you know, don't worry too much about this. If I don't orgasm, don't get too freaked out. It's just like, you know, whatever. It's going to take more than one encounter. And I always kind of thought to myself, that's just me. But then, you know, reading more about it, what I've learned was it's not just me. That's a fairly common experience for women.
Well, and you know, I actually listen to Dan Savage's podcast quite a bit, and I think it's actually not an uncommon experience for young gay men too. You know, they have some concerns, and part of that deal is that it's really hard for a guy to fake it. You know, it's real obvious, you know, whether they had an orgasm or not.
We don't condone faking it.
What's that?
I said I don't think we condone faking it.
No, not at all. But, you know, a woman can basically bring an encounter to an end by faking an orgasm. You know, that's been known to happen. But anyway, you know, Dan often gets calls from young gay men who are wondering, hey, you know, how do I deal with this performance anxiety? You know, and his advice is basically take sex off the table for the first encounter, and you know, you're gonna roll around on the bed and get naked and rub against each other and stuff like that, and there's no expectation that it's going to go any further than that. And that's probably good advice for anybody that's you know, starting a new sexual relationship, and you know, you do not have to go straight for the sex on the first encounter.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, it's like I don't care if people do that, like men or women. I don't care if they do it. I don't care if they like it. I don't care if they're orgasming every single time they have sex and they're like having the best time ever. That's my point. Wasn't to like denigrate any of that. It was merely to make a point that there are differences between men and women in general, and that sometimes those differences are categorized as something's wrong with this woman. And it's like, but really, that's normal for a woman. It's just not normal for a man. But since I'm not a man, you shouldn't be looking at me that way.
I look at you that way anyway, Tracie.
That I'm not a man? That I'm not normal for a man. I'm not. I'm not at all. I'm a completely abnormal male.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. How did we get to this? From the Cosmopolitan.
Well, I think we were talking about framing, the idea of framing things as wrong when they're different, instead of just simply like she was saying how it's like there's an overall male perspective social expectation that comes from the inherited idea of, for example, she was using like in literature and in ideology that's political, of focusing on men. And that's true. And what also comes from that, though, is the idea that women, it's almost like women have to be men in order to be normal or accepted or understood. And it's like, no, I can't do that. And I don't want to do that. What I want to be is respected as a normal woman, not respected insofar as I can be like a man. That's unfair. And we don't do that to gay people. We don't say, if you can get more straight, then we'll respect you. It's like, no, we respect that they're different, that they're gay, that they like, the same gender. And we don't sit there and say, when you learn to like different genders, then you can have some respect. And then you'll be normal. We would never do that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we leave that sort of thing to the Family Research Council.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say a thing about the cosmopolitan guy. Both in saying, well, why aren't you talking about cosmopolitan? And why are you calling it feminism and not egalitarianism? Which, I identify as well. But it's this idea of, you're bringing up topics, but I'm going to completely ignore them and try and talk about something else. It's this way of dismissing the problem and saying that it's not as important as something else. When you do this thing of saying, that's nice, but you're not really saying that that's nice, and so you kind of gotta be a little more respectful. I don't know very many feminists, if any, who agree with Cosmo, and this is famous for being a honeypot for feminists, tearing it apart. And if you're not aware of that, then I feel like you're not really in tune with what feminism is trying to accomplish. And then kind of back to the language thing that Jen brought up tangentially. There's just this ridiculous amount of sexism in language that vastly favors men, and to get all these panties in a bunch because this one word, the root favors women, it's a little bit ridiculous. There's this one word that kind of brought it home to me. When I was learning Spanish, there's all the words for you, me, them, and in Spain they use this word vosotros, which is like you all, a group of people. And there's a masculine and feminine version. There's vosotros and vosotras. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And vosotras is only if you're referring to a group of people where everyone is female. As soon as there is one male in the group, it switches over to vosotros, the masculine version. So that one male in the group is more important in defining the group as a whole than having the rest of them all be female. And that's kind of what we're up against when we're fighting these things. And this language thing is really very small.
Yeah, it is small. I want to just say, I brought this up. This was another thing that I brought up on my wall. And a lot of these issues I'm bringing up on my wall because I'm interested in what other people think about them. And I'm especially interested in what the guys on my wall have to say about some of these things. And one of the things that we talked about was the egalitarian label versus the feminist label. And I saw this as like a purely perspective issue. If I'm the person who is by virtue of my birth, I'm born into all the groups that are least discriminated against in society. I'm born Caucasian, I'm born male, so in the US, I'm on that top rung where everybody should be. And I'm just born that way. So I encounter very little in the way of, bad discrimination or any sort of like social or cultural denigration that is, historically relegated. Now I understand that there are, I'm not excusing for a minute, the group of man haters who would throw down things like all men are dogs, all men are pigs. I know those people are out there, and I know that men are subjected to that kind of vilification by some people, and that's completely wrong. But in general, there's not this history of slavery. There's not this history of being treated like property. There's not. So you've got these people that are born in a way where, to them, they're looking at, the issue of equality applies to everyone. So when they're thinking in terms of equality, they're thinking in terms of, racial equality, gender equality. There's like all these different things that matter to them in sort of an equal way, right? Because to them, it's like anybody should be. I think minorities, I think women, I think everybody should be treated equally. And so I think of myself as egalitarian. And I think from the perspective of somebody who's not targeted specifically for discrimination, that makes perfect sense. Now, when somebody is in a racial minority that is targeted, suddenly there's a specific area of inequity that becomes sharply focused, which is racial inequity. And so if I'm born and I'm in a ghetto and I'm a racial minority and I'm being, subjected to like a school that's subpar, and we don't get any funding, and there's like, drugs being sold on the corner, and there's like rampant, underage prostitution all up and down the street. And, if I'm living in hell because I'm born a racial minority into a socioeconomic class that, it's just, I'm already in a deficit socially and economically in this society. And so to me, racial equity is going to be very important, far more important to me than all these other issues. It's not that I don't want women to be treated equally. It's that I'm having to deal with immediate inequities in my life right now that deal with race, and that's what's important to me because of my situation. And so then you have somebody else over here, and she's a woman, and she's being raised in this church, and the church is telling her that she's her husband's property, and she needs to do what he says, and that, and blah, blah, blah. And so she's just like, why am I having to deal with this? And she starts to get out of that, and she realizes, wow, that was really discrimination aimed at me as a woman, and this is, and so this is important to her because this was what she was subjected to. And so she goes into an area of equity thinking to herself about gender inequity because that's what she is subjected to. And it makes perfect sense to me that this is what's most important to her. And so when I look at these labels and people saying, I am not prepared to piss on some guy who says, I look at myself as an egalitarian because I think that's fair based on where he's coming from. But at the same time, I don't expect him to piss on somebody for using a gender equity label when they are clearly in a situation where that's going to matter to them more than overall egalitarianism. And it's not that I'm not egalitarian and that it doesn't mean I don't want racial equality. It doesn't mean I don't want religious persecution to stop. It doesn't, I don't want people persecuted for their gender. I don't want them persecuted for their race. And so yes, I would agree that overall egalitarianism is the goal. But you got to understand that within that overall umbrella of equity, there are many different slices of areas of inequity that have to be addressed. And it's okay to identify those areas and say, okay, we're dealing with gender issues of inequity over here. We're dealing with racist issues of inequity over here. We're dealing with religious discrimination over here. There's all these different areas, and it's fine to say I'm anti-theistic. I think that religion is like harming, and so I want to stop this harm that religion is causing and this persecution that's coming from religion. You can do that, and it's okay to say I'm anti-theist, and I'm also egalitarian, but my focus is on religious harm. My focus is on gender harm. My focus is on racial harm. I don't see a problem with that, and I don't know. I'm kind of with Lynnea. This, to me, almost seems like an area where I think people can reasonably agree that this is not a big problem. We have these different areas. Pick your focus. There's plenty of prejudice to go around. If you're fighting prejudice anywhere on the planet, thank you. Thank you for whatever area you're involved in, whether it's all of it, whether it's a piece of it, I don't care. You're doing a good thing. But if all you have to contribute is pissing on someone else for a label that you don't agree with, and that's your contribution to the movement, then just please shut up. Because you're not contributing. You're just making a problem. And I don't want to argue with men who think that I should be equal just because of a label. As far as I'm concerned, reasonable men who agree in egalitarianism are on my side. And they are my allies. And if you're pissing on a label, you are not those guys. I want the guy that really is egalitarian, not the guy who uses the label so that he can then be a dick to me for saying that I'm interested in gender equity.
Wow. Woo. I think if you can quote that entire thing, you get one of the one of the gifts. Don't hold me to that.
So somebody will sit at home and transcribe that and play it back and forth till they get it.
I don't even know what I just said, to be honest. I'm like, did I just say something?
We got it on record.
Yeah, I'll know. I'll know when I get some hate mail. But yeah.
No, it was good, and I mean, yeah, great rant, because I am personally so sick of getting email from people saying, "Oh, I know you guys say that you're for equality, but why aren't you talking about this?" And it's some pet thing that they, have dreamed up. And, some of them you go back to them, you say, "Okay, this is important to you. What have you done about it?" And, crickets chirping, because, it wasn't really that important. It was just something to hurl at us, because we're feminists or something.
Yeah, there's real work to be done. I'm not going to sit here and argue with somebody over a label. If you want to fix something, let's fix it. If you want to piss about what I call myself, go piss somewhere else, because I don't have time to screw with you.
Well,
Okay.
and I can give you an example, and I think we brought it up last week when we talked about the, or maybe a couple of weeks ago when the word came out that the definition of rape had recently been changed to include men.
Bravo.
And it had been broadened to include other coercive sexual acts that previously were only covered under various forms of sexual assault. And so, yeah, this is something that feminists had been working on for years, for decades, trying to get this definition broadened to include lots of different coercive sexual activities and to include men. Because I can tell you, I used to work as a rape response counselor. And if a man called to get counseling because he had been raped, it wasn't even called rape. And out of all the crap that women faced going to the police to report a rape, it was all of that, and the extra layer of you're not a real man because you let a man do this to you.
Sure.
Thing. They had so much crap. So, the reality is we probably don't know how many men get raped every year in this country because we haven't had a good definition of rape that applied to men. Now we do. So now we can get a grip on, just how many men suffer from rape every year. But anyway, and I kind of lost my train of thought on that. But anyway, this is, this is an example of something that this directly harms men. Okay, so you had a group of women working on something that benefited both men and women. And so we've got, guys out there saying, "Oh well, Rebecca Watson wouldn't approve of this," or something stupid like that.
Yeah, instead of, cool, what did we just accomplish?
Yeah.
What did we just accomplish? You know what I mean? And that's enlightened men and enlightened women working together to fix something that was broken. And that's what needs to happen. The people who are interested in actually progressing, fixing things, and moving forward need to just do it. And when somebody starts to get distracted by some petty piece of crap, I think that needs to be just cut right out of the dialogue. And the people who are interested in real progress just need to move on and say, "Sorry, we don't have time for you."
Yeah, I agree.
True.
All right, so now we spent 20 minutes talking about something that we said doesn't even matter.
I'm sitting there and I just feel like,
I know. I can't stand it either. I'm not even going to dignify it by giving it one more second.
So we were talking about sex earlier.
Yes.
But that's only because we're dirty sluts who are not religious.
And we're not pure.
Exactly. But what could inspire you to become pure?
What?
A teddy bear. So there's this video that got released recently. It was a student-made video actually about the purity bear. I actually kind of am having trouble bringing up the article about it, but you can see it on YouTube. And I did transcribe the dialogue. It was pretty short. And it was filled with a lot of awkward pauses and stares. So I highly recommend watching it because there's a visual element that really adds that extra something.
Is there a title to the video?
It's Purity Bear. If you look for that,
You'll find it.
If you look for that, you'll find it. So it's this guy and a girl, and they look kind of teenaged. And they're walking up to the girl's door, and the girl says, "I had a really good time." And then the boy says, "Yeah, me too." And the girl says, "I really like you a lot, you know. You're not like the other guys." Because the other guys are sluts. Get that? Okay, and the boy says, "I really like you a lot too. You look so pretty tonight," or "You look really pretty tonight," or something. Or "You looked really pretty tonight." And the girl says, "You know, my parents aren't home right now. If you want to come inside for a little bit." And then it kind of is like this awkward pause. There's enough awkward pauses that the time for the purity bear to speak is not like unusual. So this guy's sitting there kind of contemplating it, and this purity bear kind of like pops up next to his shoulder and says, "Hey, don't do it. This decision could define you for the rest of your life." I know she's cuddly. Look at me, I'm cuddly.
Wait a minute. There's like a teddy bear saying this?
Yeah, it's a teddy bear saying
And he's
it.
like the Jiminy Cricket of this video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it cuts away, and the teddy bear's gone. And the boy says, "Nah, you're worth the wait. It just doesn't feel right." And then it cuts to them getting married, and he says, "Now this feels right."
The thing is, this reminds me of those people that like to dress up like stuffed animals, like they get their sexual, like, what is that? There's like a thing. There's a
Furries,
label. Is it
or
furry?
plushies.
Is
I
it
think are the stuffed animals, and
Yeah.
furries I think are like
Real animals?
realistic.
Yeah,
I
from
think.
now on, he's gonna, like, whenever he's with this woman, he's gonna be thinking of this teddy bear. I'm cuddly too. It's like he's either gonna have impotency problems or he's gonna be into the bear.
Yeah. I don't know.
He's only gonna be able to do it when the
It
bear
was
is
not
there.
a very good-looking bear. I will say that.
That's just scary.
Some guys are into bears, you know.
Look at me, I'm cuddly.
Yeah, no. Well, if you're into bears, you should not be marrying a woman.
Unless she's willing to dress up a lot.
So it's pretty ridiculous, and a lot of people have commented on it. But there's this one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about. This one angle I wanted to talk about specifically, which is that there's this disrespect for the female's autonomy and sexuality, because here it is, this woman that's saying, "I would like to have sex with you. I have made this decision that I am ready, and I really like you, and I want to have sex." And now, of course, you know, every male, every person has the right to say, "No, I don't want to have sex with you. If you do anything else, that's rape." But this guy wants to have sex with her. It's pretty obvious that it's a temptation. He wants to do it. He feels like probably he's ready for it, but he's thinking to himself, and he says, "Nah, you're worth the wait. You're the one who needs to be waiting. Not that I need to wait. Not that I don't feel ready. It's that you think you're ready, but you're actually
No, I
not."
totally hear what you're saying. It's like, I'm not going to treat you like the slut.
Yeah, I'm not going to treat you like this is your decision.
You're too special to have sex with right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's this really weird sexist controlling thing undercurrent.
No, I
to it
totally
all.
agree.
And it's really weird and creepy. But that's what the purity movement is all about. It's about saying what women can and can't be doing, and having the father be in control of the woman's purity, and in this case, the boyfriend looking out for the woman's purity. You're worth it, not I'm worth it. And I guess the boy's purity doesn't matter.
I think what's interesting is, depending on an individual's goals, there can be legitimate reasons to not have sex with somebody and wait, even if you're interested in sex with that person. So, for example, you might be if you're kind of in the market and you're thinking to yourself that you're looking for a long-term thing and you don't want to spend a lot of time just dating, or and you're looking to get serious with somebody and you're trying to find someone to be serious with, to build a life with. I can definitely see, a certain amount of wisdom in saying, I'd like to get to know somebody first a little bit more. I'm not interested in just a fun encounter. I really want to get to know somebody, make sure that this is okay, gauge whether or not there's a long-term viability here, blah, blah, blah. And you might want to spend some time just getting to know a person before you...
Wrap it up. What? The apartment next to ours is on fire.
Oh!
Whoa. Okay, we're ending. I don't know.
Okay, Godless Bitches has just recovered from an interruption as the apartment beside us is on fire.
God's wrath missed by
yeah,
numbers.
Matt has apparently the situation's under control with the firefighters out there. Hell, I don't know. I don't even know what we're talking about.
I remember it was the Purity Bear. And
I was looking up trying to look up more details on why it was made.
Yeah, and all I was saying was that there might be some legitimate reasons to wait to have sex with someone, but one of those reasons wouldn't be, I think you're a slut if I have sex with you now.
Yeah, it's this ridiculous thing of once you've had sex, you're ruined.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
You take that away from a girl.
If you want to have sex, have sex. If you're looking for something long term and you want to get to know somebody first, then get to know them and don't have sex, even if you might feel like it. You want to hold off and get to know people. But whatever you're doing, yeah, man, don't be denigrating people just for being sexual.
Okay,
well,
so
yeah, and if you're about to hook up with somebody that thinks you're dirty if you have sex with them, don't get involved with them. Run the other way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Unless you want to be dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to defile them, their pure little ass.
So I wanted to look up what the deal was, why this was made. And it's to promote Purity Day, which is Valentine's Day. I know they're trying to counteract Valentine's Day.
It's just irony.
No, they're targeting that specifically so that you'll be thinking about purity on that day, and instead of having sex, you'll be heavily reminded to stay pure.
They'll give away white Valentines and white roses.
Yes. So it's put out by the Liberty Council.
No shock there.
Yeah, and so they have all this really horrible, horrible as in inaccurate kind of stuff, or misleading information about sex. There's a 50-50 risk of you getting an STD on your first sexual encounter, but really they're talking about HPV, which you can get a vaccine for.
Yeah, so that scare tactic gets taken away.
So, and I mean, out of all the STDs you could possibly get, HPV is one of the most benign. And most people can't even tell that they've got it. It doesn't lead to complications for most people. It's a very chill virus as far as viruses go.
Except for the cervical cancer link.
That's only one strain.
Yeah.
And that's... well, first of all, preventable by the vaccine, and that only happens to a very small percentage of people, and it's preventable by the, Pap test, and it can be caught early. So it's benign if you have the prevention.
So it's one of the most benign. I mean, it can be dangerous, but as far as
it's not like it's body ravaging as the vaccine, I understand what you're saying.
And then there's this emphasis on chlamydia and gonorrhea causing sterility. And it's yes, they can if they're untreated for years and years, but you can take antibiotics for that. And those are prevented with condoms.
Do they have on there that syphilis will drive you insane?
They do have syphilis, yes.
Do they say that it would make you crazy?
Yes.
They do. I was only kidding.
No, that's
okay.
Syphilis makes you crazy.
Okay, yeah, that's another one that untreated.
Yeah, and extremely rare.
Yeah.
Syphilis is one of the most rare STDs. It's only really even mentioned because of how serious the consequences are.
And those are extremely rare.
Yeah. And then they refer to AIDS as a virus instead of HIV as the virus.
Well, and some of these, I mean, outside of the HPV, I mean, a lot of these are preventable with just condom use.
Yeah. So it's...
And you shouldn't be running around having unsafe sex anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, I'm confused. I thought masturbation caused all this stuff.
No, that's insanity, just being insane, and also hairy palms. And that's again if it's untreated.
Oh, and poor eyesight. Don't forget that.
Blindness.
You'll
that's
go
correct.
blind.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they don't mention that.
Well, that's masturbation. That's not sex.
That's true.
Yeah.
But they don't even want you to masturbate. They're real, purity people.
That's why I wear condoms on my fingers when I masturbate.
Oh, the little finger ones?
I don't want insanity or blindness or hairy palms.
Oh yeah. But only your fingers are covered. What about your palms?
I don't
That's
masturbate with
important.
my palm.
Okay.
Well, God, how do you masturbate? Christ! I thought 3 centimeters was something. I don't even want to know.
I use
What are you carrying?
I'm packing.
Apparently,
You wouldn't know it.
Wow, Tracie, have you been drinking or something?
As a matter of fact,
Yeah, people are gonna hear this.
it's about you. Why do I care?
Okay. Noted.
Oh,
It's you.
wow.
You're the one using the palm.
Oh, okay. Oh, Tracie.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of their flyers are just ridiculous. But they're pushing hard for a pure Valentine's Day. I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen.
Maybe we should institute something in response to that, like filth it up. Filthy
Your
February.
Valentine's Day should be as filthy or as pure as you want it to be.
Right, and follow Dan Savage's advice. Have sex, then go out to eat and drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I think that's excellent advice.
All right, then. Was that all you had about Purity Bear?
I think so. There's a bunch of other crazy stuff that the Liberty Council was trying to say about dating and what a real friend is. And basically, it was just a whole bunch of stuff. Don't succumb to the peer pressure of having sex. Succumb to our pressure of not having sex. Yeah, and dating is dangerous. And it can cause all this stress and drama. So there's a bunch of stuff. You should check it out for just a laugh.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have something that is not a laughing matter for sure. Santorum says pregnant rape victims should make the best of a bad situation. So,
I agree, by getting an abortion. That's the best way
Yes.
to make something good out of a bad situation.
So women in such a position should not get an abortion, but instead welcome their horrible gift from God.
The horrible gift. Sounds like something your aunt gets you for Christmas. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, give birth to the gift from God. He added, even if his own daughter became pregnant after being raped, he would still urge her to have the child.
How good of him.
Yeah.
What a sacrifice for him.
I know, right?
He was in an interview with Piers Morgan, and Santorum said, well, you can make the argument that if she doesn't have this baby, if she kills her child, then that too could ruin her life. And this is not an easy choice, I understand that. As horrible as the way that son or daughter was created, it is still her child, and whether she has that child or she doesn't, it will always be her child, and she will always know that. And so to embrace her and to love her and to support her and get her through this very difficult time, I've always, I believe and I think the right approach is to accept this horribly created in the sense of rape, but nevertheless a gift in a very broken way, the gift of human life, and accept what God has given to you. And as you know, we have to, in lots of different aspects of our life, we have horrible things happen. I can't think of anything more horrible, but nevertheless, we have to make the best out of a bad situation, and I would make the argument that that is making the best.
I wish he would make his argument. Like, is there an argument in there, or is it just God did it, and so it's good?
Well,
I think that's it.
Was that pretty much his argument? I mean,
well, yes, that you shouldn't kill the baby, and technically this is the more consistent view. If you believe a fetus is a human being with rights, then you shouldn't kill it just because its dad was bad.
Yeah, rape and incest would not be consistently, I guess, excluded from abortion, as far as like it wouldn't be, it would still be an abortion restriction if you believed in life at conception and held to that view. I can't see making exceptions for rape or incest if that's the argument you're going for.
Now, rape and incest exceptions are completely consistent with the view that women should suffer for voluntarily having sex.
Yeah.
I think it's also consistent with the idea of if God makes you pregnant against your will, then that's a gift, because that's how their Savior was born. Was the Holy Spirit raped Mary, pretty much.
Yes. But yeah, according to...
I think that's debatable. In some translations, it kind of seems like she consented, let this thing be done to me as it's God's will, although she was underage.
I mean...
Yeah.
So, this is like the most... If your boss says, we're going to have sex, that's considered sexual harassment. Just because of that power imbalance. And this is the most powerful being in the entire universe. That's...
True. You can argue it from that angle. But technically, she consented in the Bible. Although all this never fucking happened anyway, so, whatever.
But, I mean, no, they believe that God chose her and said, you're gonna carry this baby. No matter what. And she's like, well, okay, you're gonna do it. Let it happen, I guess. So their whole thing is based on, if you are pregnant against your will, then that's a great thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, if God does everything and then God lets you get pregnant, then that's what God wants. This is directly out of a theistic worldview.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. I mean, think of the rape victims listening to Santorum.
I have problems, I think, with somebody, quote, encouraging somebody to have a child or to not have a child. I really think that that's a situation where somebody has to make the decision, and it's up to everybody around them that loves them to simply support whatever they decide.
Right. I agree.
I mean, if somebody asks me my opinion, if they say I'm confused and I don't know what to think, and they're like, what do you think about it? I might be willing to consider like what I know about what's going on in their life and say, well, it looks like these are your options, and help them sort of, untangle that and set it out to have a look at it. But I definitely can't see myself wanting to be responsible for having advised a person to have a child or not have a child. That's seriously their decision.
And that's kind of where some of these crisis pregnancies kind of, they really get me very fired up on this, because unlike a Planned Parenthood, for example, where you go in and you'll find out what all your options are, the crisis pregnancy centers specifically try to steer women away from some of their options, such as abortion.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not appropriate.
It's
You know,
not
the appropriate thing is offer options and support for what the woman decides to do.
Yeah, and that's the same. I mean, honestly, that's just, if I had a friend that was raped and she became pregnant and she came to me and she said, I know this sounds nuts, but I want to have this baby, I would be like, okay, then if that's what you need to do. I mean, I'm not going to tell her, oh my God, no, you were raped and you can't deal with this, and I would not try to talk her out of it.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And I know someone who was raped and had the baby and kept it and loves that child. And that's a choice. Pro-choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's this autonomy thing, it's respecting the individual's decision and promoting their ability to make that choice. That's what's important, especially if you've been raped, especially if someone's been raped, because they've just had that control over their lives taken away, and the most important thing they need is for it to be given back.
Right, and Santorum would just strip them even more. Of course, he doesn't think women should have, hardly any choices anyway, so... No birth control, no abortion. If you're raped, oh well, that's just God's will. Whatevs. It's all cool. He's a horrible, horrible, horrible man, and you should Google his name.
Yes, please keep it high.
Everyone should Google Santorum.
I haven't been that brave.
All right. Well, there's several other stories we could talk about. The 39th anniversary of Roe v. Wade was Sunday. Woo! And Obama did put out a statement in support of it. Woo. And as we remember this historic anniversary, we must also continue our efforts to ensure that our daughters have the same rights, freedoms, and opportunities as our sons to fulfill their dreams.
Oh, that's touching.
Yes, so at least he gets that right, even if he doesn't get a bunch of other stuff right. So, does anybody have any other stories? I've got a bunch. So, I mean, we could be here all night.
I know you were throwing them down in Facebook.
Oh well, I always throw them down on Facebook.
Well, I guess some of the healthcare reform laws kicked in, and one of them was requiring all employers to cover birth control with no copays.
Yes, including
Catholic hospitals, and unless you employ and minister only to members of your own faith group, you must extend, birth control without copays or deductibles to everyone. And so, of course, Bill Donahue from the Catholic League is foaming at the mouth again because, it's just anti-Catholic, and Obama's going to have problems with Catholics, for the election because, he's offended all of us.
Yeah, 98% of them use contraception.
Yeah. So I was listening to Bill Donahue on Fox News saying, he's offended us. And I'm like, oh, both of you? But, but anyway.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, the Catholics are foaming at the mouth. The archbishops are pissed because, the other thing is that, they can no longer discriminate against gay and lesbian couples for their adoption racket, Yeah.
Very nice.
Oh, those poor Catholics.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to clarify, make sure everybody's clear on this, they can discriminate.
They just
cannot get public
federal
funding
money
for it.
Yeah.
Correct. So yes, that's always, it warms my heart, my godless bitch heart, to hear Bill Donahue fume about something, because then I know that something good has happened.
That's true.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing is, what's funny is, I mean, think about this. They're talking about how it's going to shut down their adoption centers, and are we going to keep these open, and yada yada yada. And the fact is, they're talking about losing public funding. It's the Catholic Church. They have a city made of gold. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not going to get you to pay for it as the taxpayer, and so they're going to have to shut down their discriminatory, bigoted adoption center now because they're not willing to part with that gold to adopt out children. They only want to do good if you're going to pay for it, and so Catholic good, I guess, is public good because we're paying for it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, fuck the kids. In more ways than
exactly.
one.
Yeah, Catholics.
Yeah.
We will not ask the Pope to not live in a city of gold. We can't be asked to do that. That's barbaric.
Yeah, we don't care if these kids have homes or not. We just don't want them, to live with the gays.
Yeah. Never mind that a lot of those kids who've been sitting in foster care would probably be happy to have 2 dads or 2 moms.
Maybe they can let the priest take care of them.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so lovely.
Yeah.
Nothing bad would happen to them then.
At least they'd be away from the gays.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what's really dangerous.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that's so horrible that it's not funny, but you gotta laugh at it anyway because it's just...
No, yeah, and please, I am not making fun of what happens in that church. I'm simply saying that it's just ironic that they take these, stances of moral high ground when they have so much house to clean.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
So, I have another story that I think is just hilarious, especially in light of what me and Tracie have here in front of us on the table.
Oh, okay.
Food containing fetuses targeted under new Oklahoma bill. You might think this is a story out of The Onion, but it is a real story. And this is from krmg.com, local news, Oklahoma. An Oklahoma lawmaker filed a bill to ban the making and selling of food or products that use aborted human fetuses.
See, now this is just discrimination against atheists.
That's yeah.
Because they know that we atheists like to eat babies.
Okay, now wait, who was making food out of fetuses? Who is this?
Okay, nobody's making food out of fetuses. This guy is, he's either just crazy or he's misinterpreted something
I would like my embryo over easy. I mean, really.
Okay, so PepsiCo uses a stem cell line to test artificial flavors. And this stem cell line that's been going on and on for 40 years originally started from one aborted fetus in the 60s that, by the way, was a therapeutic abortion, so it was medically necessary. And they've been keeping those cells going for 40-something years.
This does sound a bit sci-fi, though, doesn't it? It's like, this is going to end in something breaking out of a lab. And
That's only in sci-fi, though. I mean, real science is a lot more boring.
Yes, it is. So these cells it's just a cell line that started that many years ago, and it's they propagate the cells and they grow them in cell culture. It's, I can do it. It's not that big a deal. And there's more cells out there than there ever could have been of, 100 people. And some people have gotten this mixed up in their head because they're anti-science people and they don't understand science, and they think that there's aborted fetuses in your Pepsi. And they're boycotting Pepsi because they think there's aborted fetuses in it. And this lawmaker must have heard about it and then not really done any research on it.
I think someone sent him one of those spam emails.
Yes. Okay. Something like that, most likely.
I made that up. I'm not, don't take that. I'm making that up. But it's this sounds like the type of thing you'd get in this is what Obama's doing. And it's number 4, he's putting fetuses in Pepsi. It's Did you even run that through Snopes before you passed a law?
Oh, I wonder
Exactly.
what Snopes
Oh,
say
man.
about that.
I mean, somebody
yes.
ought to mail him a copy of Philip K. Dick's book, or I guess the film adaptation was Soylent Green.
Oh yeah.
Like, no, Soylent Green is people. Don't eat it.
So yes, don't eat the fetuses, which is kind of funny because I'm holding in my hand a cyber skin 12-week fetus, and Tracie has got a keychain of a clear plastic woman's torso with a fetus floating in liquid in the stomach.
It doesn't have snow.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
When you shake it, just the little fetus moves
I wish
around.
my uterus had snow.
Oh. I gotta say, these things are incredibly creepy. I'm sitting over here staring at these
can I just say
fetuses.
thank you, Nicole, for my keychain?
Fetuses
Give her a
are-
shout out.
They're creepy. And these are like, I don't know, like, it's Tracie's thing is almost like a fertility idol with like this fetus inside it.
It's like a fun part.
Yeah. I could see future like anthropologists looking at this and saying, and people and women carried these around to increase their fertility.
That's right.
That's what I feel like. And then
And the Muslims would be like, how did they know? How did they know that's what a fetus looks like unless God told them?
someone emailed that to us not too long ago.
I know. I'm not kidding. I did not make that up. I mean, that's actually a claim for validation of the Quran, is that it says what like an early stage fetus looks like, and therefore God.
And it doesn't even get it right, because it says there's bone, and then God puts the flesh on the bones.
I don't even know.
And it's like, that's okay. Like, maybe if you were making a stick figure, that's how you would make it.
The one I heard, it's hard because
I
I can't read Arabic, so you have to go by whatever they're telling you. But they told me it was described as like chewed gum or something like that. Like that was what the description was, and they were like, and look at it, it does look like chewed gum, and it's like, what can I tell you? I mean, aborted things happened. You raised all kinds of animals. I'm sure they had like abortions. I'm sure you slaughtered some pregnant goats, and I'm not surprised you know what's in the womb at different stages. I mean, why wouldn't you?
That's also what happens when God tells you to slash the bellies of pregnant women.
Yeah, you get to see some things.
Yep. Anyway, I think someone got cut off.
Now, I don't know if that's the Quran or if that's just the Old Testament
Well,
Hebrew
I mean,
stuff.
It's
I don't know if it crosses over. I mean, I know it's in the
builds
Bible.
on it.
I don't know if it's in the Quran as well or not.
For Islam.
Crazy.
All right, so on from fetuses. I just got this story right before we started. It's from BBC. It's called Meghalaya, India. I think that's how you pronounce it. Where women rule and men are suffragettes. Which I think is kind of funny because suffragette is female, but
this was a weird story.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about this story. I suppose I didn't really have time to look more at it, but apparently it's a matrilineal system where property and names and wealth pass from mother to daughter rather than father to son. And apparently some men are deciding to speak out against this. Keith Pariat, who's the president of their men's rights movement, he's quick to assure me that he and his colleagues do not want to bring women down. We just want to bring the men up to where the women are. Mr. Pariat, who ignored age-old customs by taking his father's surname, is adamant that matrilineal is breeding generations of Qazi men, Qazi being the ethnic group, who fall short of their inherent potential. If you want to know how much the Qazis favor women, just take a trip to the labor ward at the hospital, he says. If it's a girl, there will be great cheers from the family outside. If it's a boy, you will hear them mutter politely that whatever God gives us is quite all right. And there's apparently some linguistic concepts of gender. Like a tree is masculine, but when it is turned into wood, it becomes feminine, not feminism. The same is true of many of the nouns in our language. When something becomes useful, its gender becomes female. Matrilineal breeds a culture of men who feel useless. So,
Yeah, and apparently it's like increased rates of alcoholism with the men. I mean, it's taken a toll. It was ugly. It was an ugly situation, I thought, when I read about, how the guys were treated. And it's one thing to trace your lineage through your mother. It's another thing to, and then when you start getting into property rights, I think it gets kind of not so cool. When you're talking about only one gender can even inherit property or own property, clearly that's wrong. How you trace your ancestry, I don't care, but how you're distributing the wealth, and when you're treating people like they're completely useless in your society, you're just begging for problems. It's like when you disenfranchise part of your population, like we do that here sometimes. We have communities that we pretty much just write off as this is just, there's no hope, and we just cut them off. And those are the neighborhoods where you start to see high crime. Those are the neighborhoods where, you don't have very decent education, high dropout rates, because these are people that are giving up because we've given up on them. And this is what happens here. I mean, it was such a, when you read like some of these like old plays and old stories from U.S. history, and you'll hear about like women having addictions and going to get like drugs and opiates and stuff that were legal, and they were just sort of surviving on these things because their lives were just messed up in this sort of, housewife mentality where they just ran a house and they didn't really have lives and they were property. And so they ended up just doing these drugs and sometimes overdosing. And this is what's going on in this society is they're talking about these guys drinking, being alcoholics, and they're just, and yeah, anybody's going to do that. I mean, it was such a role reversal of like the worst periods in U.S. history, in areas where women were treated the worst. And it sounded like the exact same thing in reverse.
Yeah, and later on in the story, men aren't given money. Mary tells me that women do not trust men to look after their money, so they take control of it themselves. Most men in our village leave school early to help their fathers in the fields. This is a great detriment to their education. So they're keeping the men uneducated and poor.
Yeah, and the woman that's reporting this to the reporter, the woman who's actually in the community, is saying it. She's not like being apologetic about it. She's just describing it. And basically she has a husband who's in this situation, and she's very denigrating to him.
Right. In the very end of the story, this reporter is with a woman and her husband says nothing. He maintains his Mona Lisa smile, and when the reporter asks the translator to ask the man a question, what does he think of the matrilineal system? There is a long and considered pause. After what seems like an eternity, the silence is finally broken. He pipes up Mary, and it is time to go.
Yeah, so his wife answers for him, says he's happy with it, and that's the end of the interview, and he never says a word.
Yeah. So assuming that everything in here is, on the level true, that this matriarchal society, this is it. This is awful.
Yeah, it's almost like a reversal of the rest of India. You've got this other situation in India we talked about before where there's not enough female infants because they keep going for boys. So they're like literally, biasing the population toward male children to the point that they're running out of women. And here you've got this other society where they're like gunning for women. It's like it doesn't work either way. You just can't weight it by gender. That whole attitude fails, and that was the other article that you had sent. We haven't talked about it yet, but it was the same type of thing. It's this woman claiming that this is what women want, that this is what feminists want, is this sort of weird reversal of these roles. And it's like, no, nobody wants that. Nope. That's not healthy. That's not good. I mean, these women seem like, they seem happy with it, but really, I almost think that you could only be happy in that situation if you hadn't really had the value of it. I mean, if you've had a partner that contributes and that is a real partnership, I don't see how you could be happy knowing that's possible with a partner that you feel is useless. Who wants to be partnered for life with someone they think is useless?
Yeah, I mean this comes across as a really pathological relationship between the men and the women on here.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I mean, you know, yeah, I was reading this where it talks about most of the men don't even finish school. They go to work.
But they're not.
They drop out of school and go to
It's
work.
almost like they're not even valued for that.
Right.
You know, instead of saying like, you know, it's really sad that most of the men don't get an education and that my husband didn't get an education, but he works really hard, and without him, we wouldn't get these crops in. I mean, it's almost like the man was describing, that they're considered useless. And
Yeah.
that feeling of uselessness and that lack of capacity to contribute. I mean, we're social animals and we have a desire to be accepted. We have a desire to feel like we are contributing to this group. And when you're denied that opportunity to contribute and you reach a point where you just give up and say, I don't even want to try to contribute anymore, that's a huge loss, not just for that person, but for the entire society.
Yep.
But why aren't
so,
the
I mean,
feminists
it-
talking about this?
Yeah, what's wrong with us? Why
I
aren't we
know.
talking about this?
That's,
Bitches.
But, you know, the thing is, I mean, it talks about the addiction and everything. And of course, you know, if you were in a situation where you're that hopeless, you would probably try to find whatever escape you could. And, you know, the knee-jerk reaction when you see someone in a situation like this is, well, what the hell's wrong with them? You know, why are they addicted? And, you know, this is what happens when you basically make someone's life so hopeless, you know, that they don't, like Tracie was saying, you know, they don't feel like they can contribute.
You've literally disenfranchised them. You have made
Right.
you have basically exiled them within your society.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wonder how it got that way. How their society got that way.
You could ask that. You know, I thought about that, and then I thought, you know, you could ask that about any society. Like, how in the
Yeah.
world did they get that way? Especially when you see something that's like a horrible disparity that you just can't even explain, and you're just like, what in the world? Like, why would you go that route? You didn't have to. There was no need to do that to another group. Like, what in the world made you do that? You could have worked with these people, and instead, what you did was you like, look at what you did. Look at the disparity and the division that you created. Like, how is that useful?
Yep. Well, one more story talking about gender and gender roles. I thought this brought up a lot of questions.
okay.
This is from LifeSite News. It's a crazy site, and this story's crazy. So, most people have heard about the Costa Concordia, a cruise ship that capsized, and the captain, who, rather than going down with the ship, or at least seeing that everyone got off safely, snuck away under cover of darkness, leaving the passengers and crew to fend for themselves. So this article says, what kind of man sneaks away under cover of darkness from his own sinking ship, leaving nearly 4,200 passengers and crew to fend for themselves? What kind of men knock aside old ladies, little girls, and young mothers to get to lifeboats first?
Oh.
Why modern men, sexually emancipated men who have been raised on the tenets of feminism and are contemporary mores? What can an expression like women and children first mean to modern men who have been taught all their lives that women are nothing more precious than sexual playthings and children nothing more than a disposable burden?
There's so many things wrong with that. I can hardly.
Well, that's what, when Beth sent it out, she said there's so much to unpack. And I remember when I first started reading it, it was the same reaction. I was just like, wow, there's just layers and layers and layers of wrong with all of this.
Well, first of all, I mean, abandoning his ship was wrong because he was entrusted to take care of the passengers.
And can we clarify? It's wrong for any captain.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what their gender is. You're supposed to stay on that ship, and you are responsible for every person on that ship that is your passenger, because you are the captain, not because you are a man.
Yes, a female captain, a female soldier. They should remain at their post to do their duty that they have voluntarily taken on these risks. That's
exactly.
That is the and I mean, you should talk to.
And just to say, too,
Yeah.
the article is written by a woman, and I find it insulting to men that she summarizes this person's, like, lack of responsibility toward his duty to his maleness.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's that I think the gist of it is that he has been robbed of what he should be as a man because of feminism.
Right,
or
but
something
what
like
she's
that.
trying to say is that this is what she's literally assigning this and saying this is what men have become. And I'm like, wow, okay, first of all, we're talking about, you know, like they think you would use the phrase a sample size in one of the emails recently. It's like, you've got a sample size here of 1.
Yeah.
And it's just a person who did the
2.
wrong thing. Well, this guy.
The lieutenant did too, or something.
Well, I think a lot of the crew, they said it was just chaos. I mean, everybody's described the event as just chaotic. None of the crew people were doing their roles. Some people were helping that were on the crew. Some people were helping that were passing. I mean, it was just complete madness, and nobody was doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the captain, this is a person who's tasked with making sure every passenger is safely off that ship before he gets off the ship himself, or she gets off the ship herself. And to look at somebody shirking their duty on that level, I mean, shirking isn't even a word that I think encompasses the amount of bad and wrong that comes with being responsible for so many people's lives and just jumping ship. And it's like, okay, so this guy is, I think, unique. Not to say that there aren't other people that would do it, but I'm not ready to say that this is like an attribute of men.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of guys who serve well, who are responsible, who would do the right thing, plenty of people who would have stayed. And there were plenty of people, men and women, who were passengers who stayed, you know, and plenty of people that stayed and then helped a lot of people and then ended up not getting off the ship themselves. And to me, it's just an insult to everybody who did do the right thing on that ship to say that gender is somehow responsible for the people who did the wrong thing.
No, and I would like to emphasize that the captain, who just happens to be male in this situation, but the captain of the ship is responsible for discipline on the ship. And, you know, the description of what happened where crew members were pushing their way to get into lifeboats and things like that, what that tells me is that there was a complete breakdown of discipline on this ship.
Sure.
The crew, they were probably poorly trained. Certainly there was no discipline, starting from the captain and all the way down. And so, you know, this was a breakdown of discipline that had nothing to do with feminism or women or men or anything like that. It was a failure, first and foremost in this individual, and then that led to basically systemic failures on this ship. So, you know, you have to stretch the limits of reality to conclude that feminism is somehow responsible for this tragedy.
Oh yeah, I hope you're reading more of this article because she gets weirder.
Oh yeah, she does. I wanted to talk about women and children first, and that idea, because one of the things that anti-feminists say so often is they threaten women with loss of certain privileges if you know, if you want to be equal, well, you'll have to be drafted, or if you want to be equal, well, then I won't give my seat up to you on the bus, or if you want to be equal, well, then it won't be women and children first.
Yeah, and I'm like,
That's
okay.
fine.
Well, I mean, there are good reasons, just evolutionary reasons why children first.
Sure, yeah.
Children,
You know, propagate the next generation and make sure they survive. And to that, you know, since most of the primary caretakers of children are women, you know, you might want to make sure that some women are on the, if that child has a primary caretaker, that's the woman.
Yeah, the parent. I think the parent of the child should go with the kid because the kid is going to freak out otherwise. I mean, whoever has got that kid by the hand that the kid is comfortable with needs to be in that boat with the kid.
I don't see a reason why both parents shouldn't be able to go with their kid. I mean,
well, that's the thing.
That's ridiculous.
I mean,
how about that? What about people with children?
Parents?
People with
lesbian
children.
parents.
Right. I mean,
who goes on the boat?
Well, the thing is, this wasn't the Titanic where they didn't actually have enough lifeboats, I don't think.
They didn't have enough because it was capsizing and half of the lifeboats
Were unavailable.
Well, but that's a situation where, again, discipline comes into play because on these cruise ships, you can overload the lifeboats. They have a certain passenger limit on there. Mm-hmm. You can overload the lifeboats. If there's
I'm all for triage, though. Triage to me is fine. If you want to say someone's in a wheelchair, I'm not going to shove that person aside to get into a lifeboat. Exactly. I'm going to help that person get into a lifeboat. And if somebody's like a crying child and they're on their own, I'm going to make sure they get in a lifeboat. And if they're with somebody, and if some woman or man has a kid with them and I'm standing there and it's just me, guess what? They're going in front of me to get in that lifeboat. The kid and the parent are going to go in front of me. Yeah. I don't care if it's a male or a female. And it's like, I know between me and my husband, we'd probably be battling to decide, like, both of us saying, I'm not going, you need to go. If there's like one slot on that boat, we would be fighting each other about who was going to get in that slot because we would both want the other person to go.
Yeah, this is not just, a heroism, all the men have to stay behind and they're going to send all the women and children out. It's just not like that.
Yeah, to me, it was just about this guy was responsible for all of the passengers on his boat, not just women, not just children. Mm-hmm. He was responsible for everybody that was aboard that boat. He shouldn't have gotten off it. There's no excuse for him being alive and people being dead.
Yeah, and this woman who's writing this article is just blaming all this on feminism, because if we didn't have feminism, then all the men would be noble enough to put women and children first, and this wouldn't have happened, and they all would have went down with the ship, which is not even true, because even on the Titanic there were all kinds of men who shoved aside women and children to get in the lifeboats, and all kinds of higher class people who shoved aside lower class people to get into lifeboats, and basically saying that it's like it's a zero-sum game. If women become more masculine, so-called masculine, then it's like there's the men have to become more feminine, like it has to equal out in the world, like it's, dark matter and dark energy or something.
Well, she has this weird conception of, she literally says something about, women wanting to rule over the guys, and that men are becoming less responsible because I guess women don't need them. So basically, if I don't run around defining myself by a man, this goes back to the Cosmo magazine, what she's saying is, if I don't define myself by a man, then the man, is kind of like useless and irresponsible. I'm using contraception. I have access to abortion, so he doesn't have to be responsible. And so he can, this is what she's talking about. He can just go and be an irresponsible, childlike. At some point, she may have used the word stupid. I'd have to look up the article. But she's describing men in like the most vile way, like taking like the very worst of the worst and saying this is what men have become because women use birth control pills and have access to abortion. And that's her argument.
By telling women they don't need men, by demonizing the value of masculinity, feminine has at the same time told men that they never need to grow up. If feminism has told women they can sleep around like men, it must be remembered that this implies that men may do the same right back. Instead of insisting that men grow up, marry a woman, and protect and care for their children, it has offered men women as toys while offering women the pill, abortion, and family court as the backup plan. Feminism defines equality as men and women competing equally in the labor market and using each other equally as objects.
Wait a minute. So if feminism is telling women that they don't need men, who is going to take care of these women in the lifeboats after all the men have drowned? I don't think she thought this through.
Obviously
question.
Not.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah. Oh, that's just so crazy.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever read something that was like so thoroughly offensive to both men and women as this article.
Well, and she's painted a really bad stereotype, really bad picture of Italian men.
Yeah, it's hideous.
Yes.
It's like, she says the average Italian man is said to be narcissistic, or a narcissist, egomaniac, coward, selfish, unable to follow basic procedures, and unable to follow the rules.
Wait, you have to, the cherry on top, you have to Google that article for material and read the line about the materialistic thing, because this made me laugh.
The materialistic, I'm looking at it.
Okay.
So this is a pretty obscure reference, but it reminds me a lot about, there's this one Mystery Science Theater episode where Crow goes on this rant about how Maltese men are these giant pansies, and it just reminds me of that. So look that up.
Did it come up, material, on a search in the article?
No, I don't.
Our feminist-inspired anti-culture coupled with a soul-deadening consumerist materialism has tossed these concepts out.
Okay.
Talking about the hero's journey.
Yeah. Now here was what I thought was beautiful about that. Read that line with the materialism in context again.
Our feminist-inspired anti-culture coupled with a soul-deadening consumerist materialism has tossed these concepts out.
Now, the writer is writing this from the perspective of selling the Catholic model of morality, and she invokes Catholicism and Catholic values throughout. And I thought, wow, this is the people that have the golden city. They have their own little nation made of gold. And she's talking about the materialistic nature of, the feminist movement, and like how it's inspired, like it's coupled with this materialism. And it's like, wow, this is the people that brought you the city of gold. And the thing about that makes me laugh is, they wander around in the city of gold, and they're like, yeah, well, but we don't own it. We have vows of poverty here. And it's like, yes, but you're eating off gold. It's like, I mean, yeah, maybe you don't own it. Maybe you're just borrowing it for the entire time you live there till you die. But I mean, you might as well own it. You're living in a golden city. And you're saying that we're selling materialism. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
They must. I wish I knew like the net value of the Catholic Church, including all that
billions.
wealth. And it's just like, wow. And I don't know how they. I don't know.
I've been to the Vatican, and it was disgusting. I don't know. After just a few rooms, I was like...
Well, I saw this thing where they showed like it was like, I guess, some vaults full of these antiquated wealth that is, like the Pope has access to it. You can go in and like fondle it, or I don't know what. But you've got like this just centuries of gems and, diadems and crowns. And I was just like, it's just ridiculous in its decadence. It's like a joke. And for her to say that like materialism is like this, the antithesis of these Catholic values, and I was like, wow, really?
Yeah. It's basically a whole bunch of crazy that she just hangs on to this one aberrant story. And in the ending paragraph, she talks about the Titanic and just flat out, I mean, pretty much lies. I mean, 100 years ago, first-class men lifted steerage-class women and children into lifeboats in the full knowledge that they were giving their lives. Yeah, I mean, some of that probably happened, but there were also documented reports of just let the people in steerage, die.
Well, it's the confirmation bias. It's like the violinist that they talked about, right? Did y'all see that on the news? They showed him a few times. He's like a violinist that was there, and he helped all these people get off the boat. And then he went back for his violin, and he ended up missing. Like I don't know if they found his body yet or not. But I mean, it's like she's ignoring the stories about the guys who did help a bunch of people get off the boat. Like, what about those guys?
Yeah.
Well, how have they somehow, survived this onslaught of like feminism that should have turned them into assholes?
Yeah, how indeed. Well, has anyone got anything else?
No, I think that's good.
All right, because we are well over, and I want to see if we're going to be on fire.
I was.
Yeah, you really were.
Yeah, you had a great rant.
All right, so be sure to contact us at bitches@atheist-community.org with your favorite quotes from Tracie or any of the bitches in order to win the lovely prizes. And we will see you next next time. This is Beth. Bye.
Tracie.
And Jen.